Hello fellow travelers! In this video we'll figure out what works best for current Spiral Abyss. Floors 9 and 10 left unchanged this time, so if you need tips for those or some basic tips, watch my first video, but this time Dendro teams won't be as good since we have new Blessing. Speaking of which, current Blessing favors main DPS characters who can stay on the field for a while and mostly rely on normal charged or plunging attacks. It simply stacks damage type buff on them depending on what damage they deal with these attacks. One thing it doesn't specify, although I think it should've, is that you lose this bonus if you deal another type of damage with your normal charged or plunging attacks. So for example, Eula won't lose her physical damage buff just because she has to deal cryo damage with her skill and burst, so this blessing works great for her. Same goes for main DPS mages or characters with infusions who can stay on the field for decent amount of time. Supplement these characters with either utility supports or long-lasting abilities to be able to stay with your main character on the field long enough and make maximum use of this blessing. Floor 11 increases your Animo damage, so Animo main DPS are highly favored here. In Chamber 1 we have to protect a monolith, so we don't really care about damage. All you need to do is to force everyone to focus on you. Just attack them and draw them away. As long as enemies don't fight monolith, we are golden. First half starts with slimes and specters, and they're immune to their respective elements, but their elements work great against each other. You can either use Animo to swirl slimes and even complement it with the same 3 elements to clear leftover enemies, or rely on Electro, Dendro or Geo, which work against them all but don't benefit from floor bonus. Although I highly recommend to bring Pyro to deal with Cryo Slime's shell more easily. Second half features 4 primal constructs, and the main thing you should know is that you can get them out of invisibility using Quicken, Freeze or Petrify, so make your team around one of those. But again, your damage doesn't really matter as long as they focus on you, so drawing their attacks away from the monolith should be your main priority. In Chamber 2 we have to deal with the shields. You can simply bring counter for each of them, focusing more on Hydro because Abyss Lector's Pyro Shield is much stronger. None of the enemies have increased resistances, so you are free to choose any of those as your main source of damage. Alternatively, you can rely on swirls. Wave starts with Pyro and Cryo mages, and you can swirl Pyro Shield to break the Cryo one. Then use Hydro to break Pyro Shield, either by hitting it directly or by swirling it from Cryo mage. After you deal with both, Abyss Lector appears with 2 Hydro mages. If you don't have a good source of heavy Hydro application to quickly deal with Lector shields yourself, your best bet is to leave Hydro mages alive and swirl their shields into it. It is risky, but it deletes Abyss Lector's shield in seconds. If you go for it, focus more on surviving and rely on Hydro, Animo, Pyro or Geo damage to deal with Abyss Lector without damaging Hydro shields too much. And remember that you can pop bubbles with AoEs, ignore them with bursts, lure them into enemies or just distract mages with taunts. In second half we have to deal with ruin enemies, which have increased physical resistance. All of them tend to come closer to you, so any AoE elemental damage team is all you need. Make sure you have enough survivability or use AoE freeze teams to make this fight much easier. For the last chamber we start with 2 waves of enemies. First, we have to fight a bunch of Fatui. They have reduced physical resistance, but Mirror Maiden has increased Hydro resistance, and if skirmishers activate their shields, you'll have to use Hydro and Pyro to break them. Plus, Cryo Gunner has Ice Trap Aura that doesn't make things easier. The best way to handle those is to bring enough AoE damage and crowd control to quickly focus at least Cryo Guy. If you can't also kill Pyro ones in the process, bring some Hydro to deal with their shields, but it shouldn't be your main source of damage or you'll struggle with Mirror Maiden afterwards. Fungi in second wave have increased Dendro resistance, as well as resistance to their respective elements, so Animo, Pyro or Electro will work better. They tend to spread during the fight and not as susceptible to crowd control as Fatui, but using Pyro can help you with that. Fungi can be set in activated or scorched state with Electro and Pyro respectively. Activated state generally makes them faster, affecting speed, attack speed and cooldowns, while scorched state makes them hit harder but reduces their speed, so set them all on fire first to slow them down, especially if you also use Electro. And focus on Hydro one first, since it enables both freeze and bloom on you. Second half is just Ruin Drakes. 4 Ruin Drakes. They have increased physical resistance and it's too hard to keep all of them stunned, so ranged combat is your best bet to make sure that you can always hit them. Do your best to keep them close to each other, but most likely you'll have to fight them one at a time anyway. Include at least one archer to easily stun and remove resistance buff from the one you focus on, and good shields or freeze are highly recommended to be able to reduce incoming damage and ignore the rest of them. These teams were good enough to earn 3 stars in first 2 chambers, but since there's just way too much bulky stuff and time limit is tighter for the final one, and those teams are far from ideal, I had to add more damage for chamber 3. Floor 12 as usual has no buffs, and this time I wasn't able to clear it in a single run. Ideally, I'd go for Aggravate team for the first half and Geo team for the second, but I have no Geo team, so I'll show you what I used for each chamber instead. In chamber 1 we have to fight PMA, who has high physical resistance. The main thing you should know is that it summons 4 Ruin Sentinels and becomes invincible. You'll have to kill just one of them that's marked with Rune Ring and has HP bar, and this is where random kicks in. Out of 4 Sentinel types, 2 have 40% more HP, so you gotta win 50-50 here to save some time. Once you kill the marked ad, boss will be stunned and get resistance debuff, giving you great opportunity to capitalize on current blessing, so good elemental damage team built around it will be your best bet here. Geo team would work great for the second half, giving you advantage against Stone Enchanter and Geo Skirmisher, but using Freeze or Petrify will prevent the former from getting into enhanced state and will give you easier time with the others as well. I finished this chamber with these teams, and yes, they were kinda strong, but I had 40 seconds left to spare in the end, so don't worry if your teams are not that good. Second chamber starts with another Eremite Elite and a bunch of Primal Constructs, and since Freeze or Petrify counters both, it's your best bet again. Yeah, again with the Freeze, but it's not my fault that we fight elites all the time here. For the second half we have the Wolf Lords, and strong Geo team would be great here. The main problem with this boss is that if your melee team isn't strong enough, you'll waste a lot of time simply waiting for the boss to land. You could use Ningguang as your main DPS to reduce it, but since she doesn't scale with death, it's harder to boost her damage. Instead, you can make a ranged combat team. Archers with enhanced charged attacks, as well as mages with good attack pattern or archers who rely on normal attacks are the best choice for your main DPS. They will give you better uptime than melee characters. Just add anything that can deal damage alongside it, like ranged summons or on hit damage, and if you rely on normal attacks, on attack effects will also work. Include Ningguang anyway to deal with the skulls ASAP and you get your team. During the fight, even though you can't leave the arena to simply wait for Tornado to end, you can make it bounce back from the edge by using your burst there to avoid damage. This will give you some free time to attack the boss. I went for Catalyzed team for this half, and I just gave my Ningguang Noblesse set and Prototype Ember to make her useful. Chamber 3 starts with Terror Shroom. It has higher Dendro resistance and overall resistance bonus, but it loses the latter when you stun it. So Electro works great here, especially with a little bit of Dendro for Aggravate. Also, random can waste your time here if boss decides to go for a run, so getting a good one might take some restarts. In second half we have to deal with a bunch of Rift Hounds, and the only damage type they're weak to is Geo. Unfortunately, there is no reactions to boost your Geo damage, so Mona Geo team will perform way better here. Also, Rift Hounds will generate a lot of Geo particles for you, boosting your Geo character's energy generation. And remember that Rift Hounds apply corrosion to your entire party, which deals damage over time but can't kill your non-active characters, so you might need some healing here. I don't have a proper Geo team, but this was already enough to get 2 stars. Since all that's left for me to improve my score here is just more grinding, I'll do it later for the sake of making this video sooner and leaving more time for you to work on your teams. Anyway, that's all for now, fellow travelers. If you have any questions or more ideas, please share them in the comments, but I wish you good luck with your runs and a great rest of your day. See ya!